The Newsround on Off the Ball.
With Gillette, for an effortless finish to your day. New Gillette Labs Razor with exfoliating bar.
This is News Talk.
Welcome along, Monday evenings Off the Ball. We are stacked this evening, lots going on. So there is an All-Ireland football final to reflect on, which we will do in the company of Enda McGinley and Colin Boyle. That is after 8 o'clock. Meanwhile, Colm O'Rourke is the new Meath manager. Blindsided a few of us. Liam Hayes, clubmate of O'Rourke, is with us at 7:30. And then the extraordinary Brian Cody era, a thing of the past. Eddie Brennan and Michael Fennelly are with us after 9 o'clock. 53106 is the text number. We're at Off the Ball on Twitter. Very happy to say Richie McCormack is with us. Hello.
Joe, evening.
And David McIntyre. Hello.
Lads.
Great to have you with us. Fine afternoon at Croke Park yesterday. There were moments, Dave, where Shane Walsh should do one thing and Clifford would do another, and then back to you, Walsh. And at several moments you thought to yourself, my God, who's going to win man of the match here? And really, it could only come down to whichever team won was the man of the match. So that was, I think, one of the aspects of the game yesterday which will linger longest in the memory.
Yeah, I was lucky enough to be at the game yesterday. I brought my son to his first All-Ireland, and what a game for him to be at it, to see two generational All-Ireland final displays from Walsh and from Clifford. And actually, if we're being really fair, I would be adding Killian McDade in as well, because I thought his performance in midfield was, if it wasn't for the other two, he would have been my man of the match. He was absolutely brilliant from start to finish, and every time he scored, it was a sense that it was an inspirational moment for Galway. But Shane Walsh, what a footballer that guy is. And, you know, there would have been many who would have been believing they were in a position to throw the doesn't do it on the big day tag at Shane Walsh prior to yesterday. But yesterday he did it on the biggest of days. And to leave with 9 points, and I think himself and McDade were responsible for 81% of Galway scores, which is in itself one of the reasons they didn't win the game. But I'm not sure we will see an All-Ireland final for a long time in which you saw two just absolutely standout, magnificent displays of shooting and skill and dummy solos and dummy hops and frees off both feet and high marks being called and defenders being left slipping and sliding. Like to see Tom O'Sullivan, probably one of the best defenders of his generation, being left on his backside by yet another shimmy from Shane Walsh was something to see. And yeah, it was a privilege to be there to see the two of them at their absolute best.
Well, that was the other thing. I mean, it was Tom O'Sullivan, who's one of the foreign players in the country, who Cillian O'Connor is still having nightmares about, you suspect. And here was Shane Walsh, and he was just driving O'Sullivan back the other way. I mean, that was the thing to maybe appreciate all the more, is that this was in an All-Ireland final they were doing this, where space and time was at a premium. And I thought Kevin McStay on commentary, Richie, it was an appropriate point to make. Several times he would say, Dara, I just want to point out this is not normal. I've never seen anything like this in a final before.
Yeah, I was going back through BBC Radio Ulster's commentary. Our colleague Oisin Langan was alongside Mark O'Shea, and Mark O'Shea pretty much said something similar. He was saying that, you know, it's tit for tat with these two. And like, that's the thing. I think it was a couple of months ago on the show around this point, we were talking about Clifford in terms of can he be judged to be a great player if he never wins an All-Ireland with Kerry? Well, firstly, obviously that question is out of the way. But secondly, the manner in which he stood up yesterday to take control of that final from a Kerry perspective, particularly in the first half when things weren't going their way, and for them to go in with a narrow margin behind at half time, mostly thanks to him, was incredible in its own right. And again, to kind of take over and freeze in the second half and to dictate things the way he did was incredible. But like Walsh, like it's not unusual. I think Kieran Cunningham pointed out earlier on today, it's not unusual for like players on losing sides to have great All-Ireland finals. Like Lee Keegan's probably done that on a few occasions in the last decade. But Walsh has just seemed to step above all that, which is why he was in that conversation for man of the match. It was like that point in the first half where he cuts in from the left-hand side and sails it in over the bar with like curling it in from about 10 yards wide into between the posts. Like, that was magnificent stuff. It felt a privilege. I can only imagine what it was like actually being there for Dave and his wee man. It felt like a privilege watching those two play football yesterday.
Yeah, absolutely. And I agree with you on Clifford in the first half, because Kerry were down by a point at the break, Dave. Without Clifford, they could have been in real trouble. And his 4 points in the first half were absolutely instrumental, because nobody around him was doing it in the first half. And that's not the first time, and I'm thinking of the Tyrone game, it's not the first time where Kerry have been shipping a lot of water, and Clifford, and it must be one of the most difficult things to do in sport, to play well when your team is not playing well, and he's done it a few times now in Croker. He's just incredible.
Yeah, in the days where Kerry haven't got the job done, you can't really accuse him of not having pulled his weight. Liam Silk did an absolutely brilliant job on Sean O'Shea, who barely got the ball in his hands from play and left with just 3 points. And his afternoon didn't start very well. He kind of pulled a free that maybe wasn't the settler he would have been looking for. It was a long way out, in fairness to him. But I don't know what you do with David Clifford. He'll be analysed to death, obviously, by managers in the coming seasons, and probably has been already. It is his 5th season after all. But you always have to just settle for 4 or 5 from play and hope that you prevent the players around him from doing enough to allow Kerry win the game. If you were a Kerry supporter, there might be just a little nagging feeling that they're just so overly reliant upon him that were something to happen to him, it's very difficult to see where they will get the scores to win these sorts of games. And we saw what happened when he picked up that injury against Tyrone in last year's All-Ireland semi-final. As an attacking force, they were spent as soon as he picked up that knock and wasn't really able to contribute. I don't know if I've ever seen a pure striker of a football with his instep than Clifford. I was in the Davin end, and so we got a really good view of his shots into the goal in the first half. And he strikes it effortlessly off both feet from about 40, 45 metres out. The ball is still 35 feet off the ground when it crosses the black spot. And it's all with his instep. He doesn't have to drive his bootlaces through it or Kieran MacDonald style hit it with the outside of his boot. He seems to have this enormous power in his boot, and yet never looks like he's yielding that power or wielding it in any great way. Yeah. His fielding is incredible. Those 2 calls he brought in with the mark that he called and stuck that over the bar, kicking frees with both feet. He's deceptively fast as well. I've been told Joe Brawley saying he's the greatest footballer of all time. It's very early to be describing a 23-year-old in those terms, but it's very hard to make an argument for a player that we believe to be a better player than him that we've ever seen. Like, who would it be?
Yeah, no, it's starting to feel that way, and there's almost an argument to just really enjoy it while it's happening and appreciate it while it's happening, so you remember it in real time. And I agree with you in the technique. It's so recognisably his own, and he's I'd say we could watch Clifford at 10 and we'd see the same technique, like a golfer whose swing is the same when he's a 5-year-old. And when it was 16 points apiece and he had that free, which obviously poor Joyce wasn't happy with, but like there is, and it was one of several moments again where McStay did say this is not normal. Was just how flowing and relaxed his technique was over a tricky-ish free kick under the circumstances. He's out on the right-hand side. There's a bit of an angle. There is a pressure on it. And it is because he has such certainty in his technique. He just knows whatever way I intend the ball to come off my boot, it tends more often than not to come off my boot that way. And it allows him to have this relaxed air. And it's a joy to watch. And as for the mark, I mean, I don't think anyone loves the mark. There are times, though, with Clifford where you're like, that was so beautiful. I'm happy to have the mark in the game. That warrants a point. One or two of them look soft in a way. I was thinking, Galway, come on. It's an All-Ireland final. It's Clifford. Get out and knock him off balance. But then I did see a photo afterwards and he does look to be about 5 feet in the air. So then I'm kind of thinking, okay, maybe not as easy as it looks to stop David Clifford catching a ball like that.
Yeah, Sean Kelly was giving several inches to him, so you can understand where Kerry were testing the fullback in that manner in the early stages. And indeed, the way the first 2 balls that David Moran got, he stuck right in the top of the Galway goalkeeper, because we saw the difficulties that he had, particularly against Armagh in the All-Ireland quarter-final. It's not something Rory Gallagher looked to exploit at all in the semi-final. I know Derry supporters were wondering why that long direct delivery hadn't been utilised in the semi-final. But yeah, it's very hard to find a weakness in his game. You probably do need somebody a bit taller, but at the same time, you need somebody who's quick over the ground. You need somebody who's tenacious. You also have to get the guys in and around him for the second ball if you do manage to break it. But often, and Shane Walsh was moving in this manner as well, they're never directly involved in the attack until the end of it. So David Clifford isn't making these runs. Shane Walsh wasn't making these runs. They're kind of just lingering on the periphery of things. And then they just pop up on a little hand pass or a looping runner outside a defender, and suddenly there's a shooting opportunity. And because the defender doesn't know which way to turn because they're so equally adept off both feet, it's virtually impossible to stop them getting a shot away. Yeah. I mean, that clip that we saw of Walsh hitting the brakes while in full sprint down his left side and turning back onto his right and sticking it over from the Cusack stand side at Thomas Sullivan's expense is, as McStay said, that isn't normal. There are so few guys over the last 50 years of the TV age that were capable of doing those sorts of things.
We should get into Newsround. Lots of texts coming in. Somebody says, "Oi, Molloy," which is my favourite start to text, I have to say. Great match. Where were the goals? Did I say it was a great match? Maybe I did say that in the intro. I don't think we can call it a great match. Not necessarily because the goals point, but just, Richie, I suppose, because it was bubbling away beautifully and we thought we were headed for the grand finale, and then the last 5 minutes plus are anticlimactic. So I don't think it falls under the auspices of great.
A fantastic duel between the two players. And interestingly, actually, I know Dave makes a point there about what would Kerry do if not for Clifford. Like, I went back listening to that infamous podcast that Jack O'Connor gave to the Examiner just under a year ago, where he was asked about the Kerry job and Peter Keane looked to be on the outs. And one of the points he raised at the time was that he didn't feel like the Kerry full forward line was being utilised to the best of their abilities. And going back listening to, there were little sentences, little nuggets here and there throughout the 5 minutes, I think it was, maybe even less, in which he addressed the Kerry situation, whereby listening back to it now and looking what happened yesterday, like, he called his shots, Jack O'Connor, a year ago, and pretty much all of them were right. And to see them pay off there yesterday in the style in which they did, particularly through Clifford, was quite something.
The Newsround is brought to you with Gillette Labs for an effortless finish to your day. It's where you're starting, Richie, the homecoming.
Yeah, homecoming celebrations in Kerry are underway. Already seeing fantastic pictures coming in from Tralee following yesterday's 20 points to 16 win over Galway at Croke Park, and Sam Maguire back in the kingdom for the first time since 2014. The ultimate destination tonight is Fitzgerald Stadium in Killarney at 8 o'clock. Those times, you might imagine, will be somewhat elastic this evening. Graham O'Sullivan was among the early risers to join Ger and Nathan on this morning's OTB AM, and said the enjoyment felt among the panel throughout the season was one of their key factors this year.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, like, that's what it's all about. There's enough stresses out in life, where football is there to be enjoyed, and it's a bit of a freedom for us all. So there's definitely emphasis on that, even in training and stuff. That, you know, of course, when it's time to, you know, tune in and stuff, we do that. But otherwise, it's about having the crack and enjoying the moment and enjoying being there.
From your own perspective, you've had a great season and a great final as well. How have you improved as a footballer this year under this setup? What has given you the freedom to express yourself the way you are at the moment?
I don't know. I suppose my confidence probably has built steadily over the league campaign and stuff, getting the opportunity there. The management also instilled a serious belief in myself. And also, I suppose, there's big characters out there as well. The other 5 backs, like, are all big characters who I could look to and turn to for advice if I ever needed it. And even some fellas there who weren't even on starting 15 who I could always turn to as well and ask for advice. So all that probably accumulated into something good for me. Thank God.
Yeah, thank God. Graham O'Sullivan there with Ger and Nathan this morning, and we're going to play some of the Jack O'Connor interview after 8 o'clock. He was on with the lads as well from the team hotel this morning. It was very interesting. He was referencing, you know, these small moments along the way which from the outside don't look overly seismic, but within the group are important. For instance, he mentioned that game against Mayo where the weather was abysmal in the league campaign. Like, you know, the main memory from it in some respects is the punditry team with umbrellas getting blown off the television screen, and he talked about winning that game was really important, and a game in Armagh, the league is really important. All these building blocks providing like a reservoir of kind of belief for the tricky days against Dublin and now against Galway. So we'll give you a sense of Jack O'Connor after 8 o'clock. And I guess, Dave, it's remiss of us not to pay tribute to, you know, one of the great serial winners in GAA. And it's funny, you think of him post-match and he was chatting to Paul Gainey, and Gainey had his son on the pitch and they looked to be very close and they were having a few laughs and a few hugs, and not an easy thing to whip off someone that personally you like at half-time in an All-Ireland final. A lot of us would say, Paul, give you another 5 minutes, giving you another 10 minutes, do something for me, and he didn't wait around. That's not an easy thing.
Yeah, well, the good managers don't wait around, sure they don't. No. And he really has delivered for Kerry on so many occasions, Jack O'Connor, and it's often in the aftermath of a really humbling defeat to Tyrone in 2004, off the back of that All-Ireland semi-final in 2003 and 2009 after they were beaten by Tyrone in the 2008 final, and now again after their semi-final loss last year. Jack O'Connor comes in and they win an All-Ireland in the following season, and they were most people's favourites from the very beginning of the year. They have gone through the season unbeaten apart from that league game against Tyrone, which was a dead rubber from their point of view. Defensively, he's transformed them. I think they conceded 2 goals in play through the McGrath Cup, the Munster Championship, the League and the All-Ireland Championship, which is extraordinary given it was a Kerry team that was being suckered by really bad goals, conceding at big moments in games over the last couple of years. So that they continue to improve defensively. We heard from Graham O'Sullivan there. I mean, if it wasn't for the likes of McDade and the other two scorers in chief, he was up there for the Man of the Match award. A phenomenal display from cornerback, capped by a brilliant score himself, and he assisted a couple of points as well. So Jack O'Connor seems to have improved them all around. Overall, though, I still look at Clifford and I think, if you don't have that guy, you don't win the All-Ireland. And if Conor O'Callaghan plays against you in the semi-final, you don't win the All-Ireland either. So they're worthy champions, and they will improve because they've got this 8-year monkey off their backs, and they've now come through at the death in 2 huge games. That will bring them on massively. But they're not runaway favourites in anyone's eyes, I would imagine, for next year's championship either, which is great. And I just was tweeting earlier, for the 4th decade running, the first 3 All-Irelands of the new decade have been won by 3 different counties. And I mean, that's refreshing off the back of Dublin's dominance for so long, that we have Dublin, we have Tyrone, we have Kerry winning the first 3 All-Irelands of this decade. And perhaps Go, if they can kick on the back of what they've achieved this year, they'll be best placed to maybe make it 4 different teams in the first 4 years of the decade, which would be great.
And Richie, that is not to mention Meath.
We're back, baby. Meath legend Colm O'Rourke is set to be named the county's senior football manager. The management committee there have recommended the 2-time All-Ireland winner with the Royals as Andy McEntyre's replacement. Fellow former players Stephen Bray and Barry Callahan will be O'Rourke's selectors. Just last month, on TV no less, O'Rourke ruled himself out of the running for the Meath job. But now it seems, after being turned and knocked back 3 times previously in the past, he's on board.
Yeah, he was emphatic on television. We'll play the clip actually from last month to Liam Hayes, who's going to join us around 7:30 or so. A clubmate of O'Rourke, knows him very well. This is very interesting, Dave. As Richie says, 3 times O'Rourke's face hasn't fitted with the county board, and now I'm presuming they approached him because he didn't sound like a man a month ago who was putting his CV on the off chance that he'd be 4th time lucky. So clearly the county board decided it was O'Rourke's time. I mean, why they suddenly decide now, I don't know, but they have.
Yeah, and you'd imagine he was in a very good bargaining position in terms of what he was demanding from them when the call was made. Very odd to see a legendary player take the managerial reins of his county 27 years after his final game for Meath, which is July 1995. That must break some sort of a record. I can't imagine there's been somebody in that position, certainly in my memory anyway, to take that job so far beyond and so far removed from his playing career. But I think a lot of people like Colm. He's given an awful lot to the game, both from his media point of view and from the work that he's done with his club. And obviously he was a legendary player for me, all those All-Stars and the 2 All-Irelands, and he was the player of the year in 1991. So the very best of luck to him. And I think everybody in the GA knows that a vibrant Meath is good for the GA. And we'll see what 2023 brings with him at the wheel.
Must be the oldest first-time inter-county manager.
Yeah, I think it is. I think that's the record there. He's the oldest first-time inter-county manager. If there is anybody else, God, I'm open to correction, but the respect with which he brings to that job, like instantly, the first training session, first time he walks into a dressing room, what those players feel looking at him. I know now, like you would say before, like if a player walking into that dressing room that they've all seen him in action, the chances are with the age profile of players now, they probably haven't. But certainly the name reverberates throughout the county, and what he has done in Meath football down through the years with Screen and with the Meath senior team under Sean Boylan, and then on a club level with Simonstown Gales as a manager in the past few years, there's nobody pretty much on that level, and there'll be instant buy-in, you kind of figure, from those in the dressing room for what he is bringing to the job and the demands that he'll make of that panel, because they'll be huge and they've a big bridge to try and get over in the next couple of years to try and get back to Dublin in terms of Leinster. And maybe it mightn't happen under his tenure, but he has to certainly try and get them there over the next few years. But the respect that he'll bring into that dressing room is absolutely huge, and I don't think it'll be undervalued.
Yeah, he won back-to-back Meath county titles with Simonstown Gales in 2016 and 17. And he's 65 in August, but is a very obviously fit 65, I think, so you'd have no worries on that front. But it's almost odd on the Meath County Board's part that, like, oh, now that he's 65, we feel he's ready. I mean, it's just like, well, he's been sitting there and he's tried several times. I don't know. I want to go back,
Joe.
I have a
Joe,
question
go back
mark.
and look at the managerial questions there for the last decade that the county board have made. Some of them have been very strange.
Well, that's my point as well. And the way, they treated Andy McEntyre late last year, and he had to go to the clubs and get voted back in. And that is not the first time that's happened within Meath. And even McEntyre did an interview on a BBC podcast where he was asked about the county board vote against him late last year, which, by the way, you do feel had to undermine this season massively. And he said it was down to, quote, irrelevant people in the background trying to make themselves relevant, end quote. So it was a very withering assessment of whatever was going on in the background there at Meath County Board. So that's a question mark, I think, hanging over the whole situation as O'Rourke goes in there. So I'm sure we'll hear from him in due course. We should press on, Rich. What's next?
Republic of Ireland striker Troy Parrott has joined Preston on loan for the season. Before departing for Deepdale, the 20-year-old signed a new 3-year contract with parent club Tottenham to effectively keep him there until 2025. Preston signed Robbie Brady earlier this summer, while already being home to Alan Brown, Greg Cunningham and Shoney Maguire. And Parrott has already set himself a goals target in the Championship, no less.
Well, double figures, definitely. I had a bit of a slow start in my senior career getting going with goals, but last season gave me a massive boost. It was the fourth season I got double figures in goals, and I need to continue that on and keep going.
Yeah, we hope he does. I mean, it's an important time in his career, and he's had some big moments for Ireland already, and plenty of Irish teammates there as well for him. James in Tralee says David Clifford must be in the running for best ever now. Anonymous text in, between Irish Rugby and Kerry, Ireland have two teams that are more dependent on one player than almost any other team in sport. In the first half, Kerry had literally nothing and no one else. Lads, it was a good final, a really good one, but it was littered with frees. Kerry won't dominate like Dublin, says David in Cavan. Keep the cheerful text coming in to 53106.
Good. Who wants to see a dominance team again for the next 5-6 years and have to put up with that kind of rhetoric that went around with that?
I don't think anyone can say this Kerry team is a great team. Like, there is the Clifford factor. There's a great player propping up lots of very, very good players. So, where are we going next?
Andy Lyon's move to Blackpool looks to be edging closer. Shamrock Rovers boss Stephen Bradley admitted today that the Championship club have been in serious talks regarding a potential transfer. Tomorrow's Champions League qualifier, second leg at home to Ludogorets, could be Lyon's last game for Rovers. While across the Liffey, Bohemians have signed Lawrence Dale on loan from German Bundesliga side Union Berlin. The 20-year-old midfielder, who can also play right back, is Bo's 7th signing of the summer window.
Another text in saying going to really miss O'Rourke from the Sunday game. Yeah, I mean, that's really end of an era now, actually. That's the trio all gone. O'Rourke somewhat unexpectedly. It was kind of beautiful, Pascalan talking about his father almost out of nowhere yesterday, wasn't it, Dave?
Yeah, it really was. It was special on his final broadcast, and I don't think a lot of people in the country were aware of how young Pat was when his father had died, and the circumstances in which he did die, days after being part of a management team that saw Kerry take on Galway in the All-Ireland final, and then for his father's two grandsons to throw another couple of All-Ireland medals into the mix. I think it was 21 in total senior All-Ireland medals that Pat had counted between himself, his two brothers Tom and Mick, and then Killian and Adrian coming off the bench yesterday, and both contributing a huge amount. I mean, the 2 points that Killian got were very important. And it's what a footballing family that is, and it's 30 years of survival in what is a pretty cutthroat game. Like, there's very few guys that you would see last as long as he has, still be relevant, and then be able to decide on his terms when he's going to step away. And for it to be on the day that Kerry ended an 8-year wait for an All-Ireland is, I'd say for him, it was very special.
I didn't see the Sunday highlights last night. Was O'Rourke on that, or?
He would have been, yeah. Actually, I saw him there as part of the Sunday game evening crew, in a box a couple of ways up from us. He was there with everybody who would have been on last night. So, yeah, that I wonder, is that his final gig as well? You would imagine it is.
I would have thought so. Richie, where are we going next?
To Ballybrit, the William Mullins train Echoes in the Rain claimed the feature race on the opening day of the Galway Festival, the Connaught Hotel Handicap. The 11-4 favourite came home ahead of stablemate Maze Runner. 20-1 shot Dutch Schultz was third for trainer Gavin Cromwell.
Jimmy in Limerick has texted in. Cheers, Jimmy, for this. On the longest distance between retiring and taking over the county team, Richie Bennis retired in 1975 before taking over Limerick in 06, which was 31 years. Wow. So there you go. Richie
Good
Bennis.
knowledge.
Yeah, excellent. Darren Clark then.
Yeah, he birdied his final hole at Glen Eagles yesterday to win the Senior Open Championship. The birdie was the difference between the Dungannon golfer and Padraig Harrington, who'd carded a round of 67 to finish on 9 under par. And Clark says one thing in particular helped him to victory at the weekend.
I was very disciplined this week. That's usually not one of my strengths. I hit away from a lot of flags, and I've through my career probably been too aggressive, going at too many. But this week I played smart. I hit away from them, and I'm here holding the trophy at the end. So maybe it's something I should have adopted earlier in my career.
I mean, Dave, of that rather extraordinary generation of Irish golfers, there's a fair argument that all of them would concede that Clark was the most naturally gifted and talented, and just an extraordinary talent at that, and probably didn't win what he could have won. So this is a nice little another underlining of his major calibre.
Yeah, there does seem to be a consensus that of them all, he was the best ball striker out of all of them. And obviously he had some incredible highs as a player, but you did feel when he kind of drifted away from relevance on the regular tour that he probably didn't win as much as his talent might have, and have allowed him to win under other circumstances. Personally, watching it yesterday, I didn't want him to hold that putt because I was looking forward to sitting down to watch a playoff involving two Irish guys in Harrington and Darren Clark. That would have been great to watch. But his 2-putt from off the green with the tournament on the line was flawless. I mean, to leave it inside 2 feet and pretty much have a kick-in birdie putt to take the title was something he'll be very pleased with.
Rich, just a last story. It does seem as if rugby will be in the courts, is how it's looking now.
Yeah, a group of rugby players diagnosed with early onset dementia appear to be taking their legal case against 3 governing bodies to the courts. They include England World Cup winner Steve Thompson and former Wales captain Ryan Jones. The claimants allege World Rugby, the English Rugby Football Union and the Welsh Rugby Union were negligent and failed to protect them from permanent injury. There's been no breakthrough in attempts to reach a settlement in those cases.
How the negligence is proved, Dave, or what the burden of proof is, I don't know, and that'll be decided in the courts. But what we can certainly say is this is going to be damaging, I suppose, to the reputation of the game. It will highlight the concerns that many people have had and continue to have, and it's going to play out over the next number of years in just extraordinary fashion. Yeah,
we've seen a lot of players telling their stories over the last couple of years, the likes of Steve Thompson, for example. But if anybody hasn't read the piece in the Sunday Times last week involving Ryan Jones, the former Welsh captain and Lions number 8, it is just gut-wrenching, heartbreaking stuff, and an awful lot more of that sort of information will come out, obviously, if this goes to court and more players and more people in those situations get to tell their stories. It's very difficult to read and listen to.
Yeah, only 41. I mean, these are just scary ages. It was really desperate. So obviously everybody's united in wishing those players well, and we'll see what happens in the courts. I suspect it's a complicated situation. Richie, we are pretty much out of time. Thank you very much.
Nice and lads.
Dave McIntyre, pleasure as always. Thanks, Dave.
Thanks, guys.
Chance.